Welcome, everyone. We'll give it just a few moments for folks to join, and then we'll get started shortly.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. My name is Matthias Oschinski. I'm a senior fellow here at the Center for Security and Emerging Technology at Georgetown University. Today, we're here to discuss how CSET's PATHWISE tool can support AI and cyber workforce policy. And in a moment, I will bring in my colleague Sonali, who will give us a short demonstration of the PathWise tool. This then will be followed by a panel discussion with three workforce experts. Before we do that, I'd like to start with a few logistical points. First of all, for all attendees, the microphones have been muted. If you're on a computer screen and you experience any technical difficulties, please let us know in the chat at the bottom of your screen, and a CSET team member will try to help you out. The second part is our goal is to have a really open and engaging dialogue today. So as your questions come to mind while you listen to the discussion, please share them in the chat, any comments you have as well, and we will try to cover as many of them as possible in the time that we have for this webinar. Now, with that out of the way, it's my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Sonali Subbaratinam. She's a data research analyst here at CSET and a core contributor to the development of PathWise. Sonali will walk us through a brief demonstration of the tool so you can see that in action here. Over to you, Sonali. So you're still muted, Sonali?
I hope you can hear me now. Okay, thank you so much everyone for joining today's webinar. I'm Sonali, and for the next few minutes, I'll just walk us through an introduction of PathWise. I'll list its data sources, and then we'll proceed to a live demonstration of the tool itself. So PathWise is CSET's latest tool for identifying and analyzing emerging technology talent in the United States. It maps workforce and education metrics for AI and cyber talent by building on CSET's workforce research. In particular, we are mapping the supply and demand of the AI and cyber workforce across US regions, and we are also highlighting the top educational institutions that are producing this talent by degree level. The reason we have consolidated both workforce and education metrics together is that they reveal key trends in the entire tech talent development pipeline. So it provides enough information for decision makers to make appropriate workforce policies and strategies. The tool itself is powered by aggregating data from 3 different data sources. First, we use the Lightcast job postings data to describe workforce demand. We then use the Lightcast worker profiles data to describe workforce supply. And finally, we use the Integrated Post-Secondary Education Data System, or IPEDS data, from the National Center for Education Statistics to describe the education outcomes and the graduation counts. For this iteration of the tool, we are using workforce metrics from January to August 2025, and for education metrics, we are using data for 2024. Now, without further ado, let's dive straight into PathWise itself. So the first thing that we see over here is a map-based dashboard that visualizes the supply of AI talent across US states. Each state is shaded according to its value. So the lighter shades that you're seeing over here are for states with lower number of AI employees, and then the darker shade is for states with higher number of AI employees, as indicated in our legend over here. We have our darker shade reserved for certain outliers within the data set itself. So right away from this view, we can see that California and Texas have the highest number of AI employees in 2025, but we can also get additional details by just clicking on any of these states. So for example, if I were to click on California over here, we have a right-hand sidebar, which shows us that there are about 1.8 million AI employees in the state for this time period itself. And the table below shows us the top 5 occupations for these 1.8 million AI employees in the state itself. We've identified these occupations by using the Bureau of Labor Statistics soft codes or the standard occupational classification codes. And right below this table is where we have our education metrics. These are basically the universities in the state itself that are producing graduates that are graduating with AI-related degrees. Our drop-down menu over here allows us to see these graduation counts by different educational levels as well. So this even gives us a more fine and granular level of analysis for the education metrics itself. So for example, in California itself, if we were to click on bachelor's, we would find that a lot of the AI-related graduates are coming from state universities in this region. And only when we move to like the higher education levels, like masters and PhDs, we start seeing more of the private universities playing a bigger part in producing the AI-related graduates in the state. So all of this was for AI talent, but we can very easily switch to cyber workforce metrics by choosing cyber in this drop-down menu over here. We can also switch to our other workforce metrics, for example, total demand from this drop-down over here. And what we're seeing now is the total number of cyber-related job postings across US states for 2025. And again, over here, very easily, we can see that California and Texas again have very high values itself. Again, clicking on each state would give us the most sought out job titles for cyber-related occupations in the region itself. What we have specifically done for demand is that we have broken it down by demand in federal government and demand in non-government or in the private sector as well. So this allows us to see the key developments in both the public and the private sector as well. And what we can also see over here is that along with the absolute counts, we also have the share of total demand and share of total supply. And the reason we have both the absolute counts and the percent shares is that both together really help us identify where these talent hubs are and what their characteristics look like. So for example, if I were to click the share of total demand for cyber talent over here, we actually see that it is in the District of Columbia, Virginia, and Maryland, where there's the highest share for cyber-related job postings, even though the absolute value showed that California and Texas have like higher absolute number of cyber-related job postings itself. So all of this together gives us a good picture of like the broader emerging tech landscape itself. But if you wanted to see regional innovation and find more fine and granular level details, that's when we would switch to our CBSA's view over here. So CBSAs are core-based statistical areas. They are a geographic region that's defined by the Office of Management and Budget, and they are essentially just a group of counties that are based off commuting ties or commuting zones. And we've specifically worked with CBSAs because it helps us find more local talent ecosystems and we can find more granular level characteristics of those ecosystems itself. So for example, if I were to switch to AI talent and find the CBSAs for that, here we would see that the highest share for AI related job postings in 2025 was in the Bay Area, where we have about 28% of job postings for that region were all related to AI itself. But surprisingly, the next highest is here in South Dakota, where we find 26% of total job postings for that region for a given time period were all related to AI itself. So having a state's view gives us a broader picture of the emerging tech landscape, and moving into CBSAs will give us a more local and regional level view of what the tech ecosystem looks like. And finally, after our map view, we have our table view over here, which basically describes all of our workforce metrics for the talent type and the region that you have selected. It's paginated for easier browsing, and you can also sort them for easier analysis. Sorting them particularly by decreasing order allows us to see the outliers more easily as well. So if any of this seems useful or interesting to you, I'd highly encourage you to explore PathWise by visiting pathwise.eto.tech. We have all of our documentation on our methodology and the dataset available in the website itself. And also, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them in this webinar using the chat function, or you can also reach out to us by clicking on our support page link in our website itself. Over to you, Matthias.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sonali. This was really super interesting, and I'm definitely curious to hear what people have to say and what our panelists have to say. So with that, I would like to bring in our panelists into the conversation. Today, we are joined by three leaders working across workforce strategy, education, and research. I'd like to start by welcoming Tiffany Shea. Tiffany is a director in Jobs for the Future Center for Artificial Intelligence and the Future of Work, where she leads strategy and operations for the organization's AI work. Her perspectives on AI and workforce development have been featured in WorkShift, EdWeek, and Inside Higher Ed. She has more than a decade of cross-sector experience spanning corporations, nonprofits, and startups. She previously designed education benefits and upskilling programs for large employers at Guild, and led strategic consulting engagements at Accenture and Entangle Solutions. Tiffany holds a BA from the University of California, Berkeley, and an MBA from Duke University's Fuqua School of Business. Next, I would like to welcome Dr. Camille Dempsey. Camille is the director of the PATHWISE Center for Artificial Intelligence and Emerging Technologies and an associate professor at PATHWISE University, where she leads the MEd program in educational technology and online teaching. Her research explores how emerging technologies and generative AI are reshaping human presence, connection, and learning. She has been recognized internationally for her contributions to educational technology and serves as an ISTE AI Research Fellow and EdSafe AI Alliance Catalyst Fellow. Camilla holds a doctorate from Duquesne University, a master's from Columbia University Teachers College, and an undergraduate degree from the University of Pennsylvania. And last but not least, I welcome Ali Crawford, a good colleague of mine here at CSET and a senior research analyst. She leads research on cyber and AI workforce development and the supply and demand dynamics shaping the US cybersecurity talent pipeline. Her work informs policymakers and workforce leaders seeking to strengthen national cyber readiness and build sustainable education to employment pathways. Ali also contributes workforce analytics and policy research to our PATHWISE initiative. She holds an MA in National Security and Diplomacy from the University of Kentucky and a Bachelor of Science in International Business from West Virginia Wesleyan College. Welcome, all three of you, and thanks for joining us for today's webinar. I'd like to start with a question to the panel as a whole, to all three of you. And we've seen that PATHWISE is able to go from the state level to a more granular level below the state level. And so I'd like to, from your experience, I'd like to hear your thoughts on why does the US need more granular and timely labor market information, especially on cyber and AI talent, and what are the consequences when decision makers don't have access to that? Tiffany, do you want to start us off?
Yes, happy to start. Thanks for having me. I think, AI and cyber roles in particular, those really specialized roles are pathways into quality jobs for job seekers. So really understanding where those jobs are and how folks can get into them is really important, especially for our mission here at Jobs for the Future. And I think just in general, timely labor market data is a big need in our field. It allows us to understand where people are situated in the labor market, as well as how they experience our systems. And, it allows employers to find talent that fits their skill needs, education and training institutions, and understand what those skill needs are so they can prepare workers and learners appropriately. And then learners and workers themselves can understand where to go for those skill needs. And when we don't have this information, it risks us, overlooking talent in places where they're needed, not knowing the skills and pathways to occupations, as well as, the training institutions and education institutions not having the right information to get folks into those quality jobs. So very, very important. So really happy to see CSET take this step towards mapping this within PATHWISE.
Thank you. Camille, what's your perspective on that?
Yes, good afternoon. So when I think about this question, I think about the US needs to be far more granular and timely when we think about labor market data, particularly with AI and cyber talent. We know that these fields are evolving very, very quickly. And so traditional data sources are not keeping up. And we know that with AI, being that it's the fastest moving technology of our time, and part of this greater shift happening on a cultural level, that we need to get a handle on it. So when I think about the ways that things are shifting, the other thing that I'm watching is how job titles and required skills and hiring patterns are changing month to month, and probably even faster than that. So if we're working with outdated or overly broad data, we end up designing programs for a workforce that doesn't exist or becomes obsolete. So when we think about decision makers not having this level of detail, the consequences ripple across the entire ecosystem. So I'm at a university, and so, when colleges build curricula around yesterday's skills, there's obvious challenges with that and preparing people for the future. So policymakers, what I wanted to say was they invest in areas that may not be in high demand. And so we have to kind of continue to look at that. And as employers struggle to find talent, even when graduates feel like they're prepared, obviously there's some gaps there, right? And so students, especially those from rural or underrepresented communities, miss out on emerging opportunities, particularly when we look at the maps in the digital divide and think about where are the talent, the jobs being marketed, and where do those students live. So yeah, I think we have a lot of work to do, but I think making sure that data, is real time, more precise, it helps all of us make better decisions.
Ali, what's your view on this?
Yeah, great. Thank you, Matthias. So I think for the cyber workforce more specifically, improving collection and better access to quality data absolutely remains a necessity so that we can actually begin to understand this supply and demand imbalance. So we know that there is a shortage of cyber talent in the US, and I know Matthias has heard me say this many times. He's going to hear me say it again today, but estimates place that shortage on the low end of about 200,000, on the high end at about 600,000. But regardless, we can all agree there exists a shortage of cyber talent in some capacity, right? And so what I'm starting to see and starting to question is whether or not the US simply does not have those 200,000 individuals actually capable of filling the jobs that are vacant, or the US or those 200,000 individuals do not have the necessary skills and training of today, as Camille mentioned, that employers are desiring or find valuable, or if it's that employers really don't know what it is that they want. And I think within that is where this imbalance exists. And I will also plug that our audience can expect some novel work on this question from Matthias and I in a few months. We're beginning to explore this imbalance more deeply, leveraging our PATHWISE tool. I will say quickly, I think a broader challenge that complicates data collection analysis for both cyber and AI is that defining what it is and what it isn't can be complicated, and your definition will almost always either be too conservative or too broad. But on the other hand, I think the data that we do have can be coded in ways that are kind of tricky to work with. And so, for example, if you noticed during Sonali's demonstration of PathWise, you may have noticed that one of the top AI SOC codes was computer occupations all other, which is a sort of catch-all code that includes like a variety of computer-related jobs that don't have a specific and separate category. And so that just speaks to the need for more granular data. So that way we aren't always lumping our data into these catch-all codes. And so as Camille said, for decision makers, I think there are two immediate consequences that come to mind. The first is, how do you know what initiatives or programs to fund, A, or B, what programs to scale? And then also, how can you be certain that the programs that you do fund or scale and that your local and regional education systems are actually training and preparing talent for local needs? And so this is why PathWise is a great step in the right direction to actually show us where talent is needed and what kind of talent we should be investing in.
Great, thanks so much. I just want to maybe go back now to a bit of focus on the education side. So that's probably a question for Camille first. First of all, you mentioned something about a cultural shift. So if you could elaborate a bit on that, what you meant by the cultural shift. And then I have a follow-up question on the challenges for education institutions, because we know now that skill requirements are shifting for with this AI and cyber talent demand. And what challenges do education institutions face in adapting to these skills changes?
These are great questions. So the first thing I would say is my research is in the area of virtuality culture theory. So I study, I have been studying technology and the evolution of culture since the caveman or cave woman. And so one of the things that I believe is that we're moving in the direction of a more virtualized world. And if we look back at a scholar by the name of Walter Ong, who outlined ancient orality culture features and also literacy features, I argue that something very different is happening right now that we can't explain with traditional notions of literacy and orality. And so when I created this theory for virtuality culture, the idea was to think about what's happening on a systems level and a cultural level, rather than just focus on the particular technologies that we're kind of obsessed with right now. It's difficult not to be obsessed when we're having really important conversations about data and AI and safety and digital divide and all these kinds of things. But I would really argue that they're all part of a larger shift. And as humans, we're going through that, and we're being transformed in all the different ways that we interact with things and people, so in ourselves. So getting to your question about the challenges in education, where do I start? There's a lot of challenges. So I think one of the big challenges is that the pace of technological change outruns academic structures, right? So we know that curricular processes, things like approvals, governance cycles, I teach at a public university, accreditation requirements, where some argue that accreditation is sort of a pre-AI construct. These things all move very slowly. And we know that AI and cybersecurity and all of these things that are happening are evolving daily. And so institutions struggle to update their courses, their programs, competencies. And I'm seeing this in a lot of the consulting work that I do with higher eds and even in our own institution, trying to help people move along. And I'll get to some of the other challenges, but the idea is moving along to the point where they stay relevant. And I think that's one of the biggest concerns right now with higher education is how do we stay relevant in this evolution? And so many of the faculty that I work with in and outside of our university, they feel like the ground is shifting under their feet. And so thinking about what I just said about the cultural shift, universities are built upon a literacy culture construct. And so, the fact that they're evolving and they're struggling, this is all part of what we're all doing as we're evolving with virtuality. So a lot of the faculty I talk to feel that the tools, the threats, the practices, everything's just changing all the time. And the minute that they get their feet on the ground, things have shifted again. And so trying to support them in ways that help them with understanding that we are living in a massive change environment, and that we have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. Right. So, and we have to be comfortable with disrupting our own sensibilities with how we have learned and how we're learning and how our students learn. The other area of challenge comes down to faculty capacity, confidence, and support. So faculty often want to integrate AI and cyber skills into their teaching, but they lack time, training, clear frameworks to do it responsibly. One of the things we did at Penn West University was we created an AI Center for AI and Emerging Technologies, to help support a lot of the professional development, which has been amazing. And then also providing enough flexibility that they can check in with me, other content experts, through communities of practice and work through challenges and things that they're excited about. And that's really made a difference. So without the ongoing professional development and communities of practice models like we've created, and access to the tools and the shift that's happening, a lot of educators risk feeling overwhelmed and not knowing where to start. And I think when we have these conversations around cybersecurity and data and ethical and appropriate use, it is very overwhelming to, like I said, to faculty members who have lived a life of literacy culture and who are struggling. So a couple other real quick points. We have a lot of resource constraints. We have 3 campuses in Western Pennsylvania, and we're very much in the rural and underserved areas. And I am really fascinated with the PATHWISE tool because I think there's really some interesting work to be done in thinking about why is it that certain areas of the country are, lighting up with job prospects, and what does that mean to, students and faculty and so forth in areas who are underserved. And then the couple other points, we struggle in higher ed and education with policy governance and responsible use questions. And again, I think getting people into communities of practice, we have a stakeholder community of practice set up for not only people inside Penn West, but also outside. And we've been having a lot of these conversations. And I would also say, if anybody here is interested, we'd love to have you as part of that conversation. Workforce alignment and industry expectations. There are huge divides. I've been going out and doing a lot of partnership work and talking to employers and talking to organizations about their expectations, many wanting to eliminate entry-level jobs. And I've just heard this last week from 2 organizations, and wanting to hire, and this sounds completely unrealistic for where we are, but like I'm listening to the reality of this, that they want to hire graduates after 4 years and have those students train everyone in their organization in AI. And of course, these are not students in leadership necessarily, or areas that you think about having skill and being able to do that. But they want to be able to eliminate entry-level jobs to hire our graduates, so like the ones that have AI experience, so that they can do higher level functions and use AI for the low level tasks. And our professors, and in higher ed, I think a lot of professors are struggling with this, right? Because they're still having debates about what's considered basic information and what do we want our graduates to know and not outsource to AI. And then the other 2 items, and I'll just make this really brief. The equity issue is absolutely a big one. I think thinking about the access, that sometimes we assume that everyone has equal access. And it used to be that the internet, we used to talk about how, if you had the internet or you didn't have the internet, that was the divide. Now it's like, how fast is your, internet speed? And then what, do you have fiber technology, or are you still on dial-up? Like, we still have people in our communities, and some of them that are they're on dial-up, and they're paying $400 to $500 a month for their cell phones. So when we think about this with education, we've got a long way to go. And the only other point I was going to make is when it concerns the concern around cultural resistance and change management. Change is hard, right? So helping to move, be people movers and get people to understand that the human side comes first, right? Like, when we're using AI and we're using all these other things, like, how do we focus on human-centered learning? And also make sure that our students are, using AI and technology and thinking about security and so forth for the sake of the workforce.
Super interesting points. Yeah, what you said about the employers, that brings me to Tiffany. So do you see similar things? Like, because what we know basically is, that work is going to be repackaged, as some economists call it, like because of different skill needs and so on. So how do employers react to this from where you sit?
Yeah, so, Camille brought up some really great points here. And I think to link it there, I think oftentimes education institutions and training institutions want employers to be able to say, well, these are the skills we need. Like, we already know what they are. Here you go build your programs. But in this fast changing world, that's not really happening because we're in this messy middle period, right? So many employers are still in experimentation and pilot mode to really figure out where is AI actually fitting into workflows and how, and what are the implications for cyber in that reality. And so I can speak a little bit from some of our work with small businesses around their AI adoption and their workforce planning practices. And we often see kind of 2 challenges. So thinking about that, human-centered model, employers are really hyper-focused right now on how to use and integrate AI tools into their workflows. And they see the redesign and reshaping of jobs as secondary, as something that will kind of naturally happen. and they'll just figure it out afterwards. But as we know that jobs, are bundles of tasks, and as you experiment with replacing or automating certain tasks, those are going to have downstream implications for the way that jobs are reshaped. And workers are going to start to see that impact a lot more quickly than maybe the organization is ready to acknowledge. And so you have a situation where enterprises are not necessarily planning for that impact, and then workers feel out of the loop or left behind, or just that their job overall is at risk. And so really folks need to take a deep look and build that planning into their AI adoption. So we have a tool, for example, our AI Ready Workforce Framework, which really helps employers analyze at the task level how their occupations may shift and change as a result of AI, and start to then prepare for the organization and company-wide impacts. And then the second big thing we see is that employers aren't really thinking about or leveraging the power and expertise of their own workers, right? So workers are using AI regardless of whether they have company approval or not, and they're finding ways to improve efficiency and quality of their work. And employers should leverage this, right? They should, in addition to top-down strategy as well, but there's a lot of expertise and value to understanding where those use cases are from the bottom up. For example, I think Moderna partnered with OpenAI and gave access to ChatGPT to all of their employees, and that then allowed them to see kind of where are some of these use cases that then they can bring into more structured pilots for, say, I think there was one around an enterprise tool to review clinical data, right? They're kind of using that data to then empower workers, but also drive business value at the same time. And so employers really need to dedicate the resources to provide access to the tools, have staff time, but also staff capacity to be able to implement a combination of both kind of worker preparation, access to tools, and then the bottom-up discovery of those use cases, and really leverage that expertise as they're thinking about that business value and redesigning jobs overall.
Okay, great, thanks. Ali, building on what Camille and Tiffany were talking about, basically with the redesigning of jobs and also maybe some of the entry-level jobs shrinking. From cyber, I know that it has one of the most diverse, entry-level paths into the technical workforce. Do you see anything changing there from the conversations that you're having, or do you have any insights into how what cyber is doing right there could be leveraged for other emerging jobs?
Yeah, thanks, Matthias. This is such a great question because I think what I'm about to say has been, will continue to be a really hot topic in this space. So you mentioned cyber does have a pretty diverse entry path for a variety of different folks, and we kind of call these alternative pathways or alternative educational pathways. And so we know that these alternative pathways, and by this I mean things like work-based learning programs, apprenticeship, internship, certifications, those programs as a whole can be more responsive to and agile in meeting workforce needs more specifically, sometimes more responsive to local regional needs than the traditional education system, as Dr. Dempsey mentioned. So, for example, back in January, I hosted a private roundtable discussion where I asked participants a really similar question. And one of the agreed upon responses mentioned how work-based learning programs are training learners, who again are future employees, on things like company or industry specific techniques, company or industry specific tools, or products, services, whatever. And so that same logic of building responsive and agile training programs that are training people on what industry wants and uses, that same logic can of course apply to other emerging tech fields. And I think this is but one of many reasons why embracing alternative pathways as a means of augmenting an existing workforce can be really effective, especially for other emerging technologies, and especially, as both panelists mentioned, that the nature of work will continue to change. The way we define and describe jobs may continue to change. And so if you are embracing education and training systems that can respond to that change, then it's only going to positively augment your workforce. On the other hand, I wanted to say that both my own work and also kind of existing research in the field, I think would agree that work-based learning and other alternative pathways can also serve the non-traditional learner in a very unique way. And so Dr. Dempsey mentioned just a few minutes ago that there's this concern about, well, perhaps maybe we're just going to eliminate entry-level jobs, right? Which I think remains a huge concern in cyber more specifically. And then I was at a conference a few weeks ago where we had a whole discussion about, on the other hand, this potential for growth in demand for like middle tier talent to fill middle tier jobs, because we see perhaps there might be an elimination of that as well if there's no more entry level talent to kind of fill that middle level talent when higher skill or other individuals have been in a job for a long time when they depart. So I think that in and of itself is a very interesting place to watch. And that I'd like to add that there's also immense momentum behind this. And so the momentum for work-based learning continues to grow, especially at the federal level, and especially for registered apprenticeship. So I'll just mention that both the US AI Action Plan and the recently released America's Talent Strategy outline strategies and initiatives for investing and scaling work-based learning, particularly for critical emerging technology fields like manufacturing. In fact, one of the initiative actually calls for the Department of Labor and Department of Commerce to create a national initiative to identify high priority occupations essential to the build out of AI related infrastructure. And so this is a gap that a tool like PathWise could absolutely have to fill. And so again, work-based learning, I don't think is going anywhere. I think we will continue to see increased interest in and building and scaling and investing in these sorts of programs, especially if they can respond to more local and regionalized workforce needs.
Great, thanks so much. Okay, before we go to the audience, maybe just one more question each, because we're trying to be mindful of time. So Camille, you mentioned the differences in regions in the country, and I think sometimes regions have also different strengths because they build ecosystems, training and education ecosystems better than other regions. From your experience, what are some fundamental metrics for a strong educational regional ecosystem?
You're asking such great questions. Yeah, I'm just sitting with all the things that have been said so far, and I'm humbled. My brain is moving 100 miles a minute. I think when I think about a strong regional talent ecosystem, it's one where education, industry, and community partners are in constant conversation, and they're not operating in silos. And this is really something right now with this shift in culture that's blowing a hole in higher ed, right? Because I think in higher ed, traditionally, professors could be siloed. And now with this greater conversation about what's happening with industry and all these other things with AI, it's just a really important time that we're all, just talking, meeting, sharing, collaborating. And so the other thing I think about is with this ecosystem idea is that students can see real pathways into local opportunities. And I think that's where, when I look at the PathWise tool, this could potentially be valuable in that area, especially as employers help shape the skills they need, and employers are trying to figure out what the skills are that they need on their side. I also think that learning around a lot of these things needs to happen K-12. And this is a huge challenge right now, where people are having debates about whether or not, children should be coding and doing, basic bones kinds of things. I I think it requires all levels of education. So when we think about community colleges and what they have to offer, universities, workforce programs, like, an ecosystem that involves all of those things is incredibly important. And so, thinking about this whole education system and what it's going to look like as we evolve, that's the connective tissue, right? That leads to where we need to be. And they translate industry needs into programs. They offer short-term and degree-based pathways. Ali did such a great job, talking about the different credentials, micro credentials, and so forth. And we're seeing that at Penn West University, like our dual enrollment has skyrocketed. And we have new AI courses and things like that, and everything's just skyrocketing. And our micro credentials, we're working with Google's new credential that is part of our project. Like, there's just so many things right now that are happening that are important. So I also think when we think about the ecosystem, we need to think about upskilling the current workforce and what it means to be innovative. And I think that means asking a lot of really important questions. I think a lot of people forget that community colleges often serve as the most accessible entry point, and we need to not leave them out of the conversation. And I know when I go to conferences and present and I listen to people talk, very rarely do people include the community colleges. And I think that that's a mistake. They're very important in that aspect. And so some of the things around, creating an ecosystem, I know we've been doing this at Penn West through our Center for AI, the idea of building bridges between our rural districts, employers, higher ed partners, state level initiatives. I just testified there was a state Senate hearing about AI in the workforce and education. And I'm not a politician, but I think, like, when we think about this ecosystem, like, we all have to stretch and we all have to, show up where we're asked to be, to attend and to do things. So I think, thinking about all this and developing a talent pipeline with all these organizations, I think, we're not just positioning, people for better opportunities and to help them move along, but it's also going to help with economic growth. It's going to help us be safe when it comes to data and all the other things that we do. So like I said, I think a strong ecosystem involves collaboration, it's responsive, and it's designed around local strengths and needs.
Thank you. So Tiffany, from your work, what do you see employers reacting to this, or building pipelines, trying to also invest more in workforce training? How do you see the reaction on the employer side?
I think employers definitely want more relevant credentials, programs, and therefore the talent to be able to fill their roles. I think we need, as an ecosystem approach, as we're thinking about what Dr. Dempsey just said, is what are some of the incentives to also encourage employers to think about incumbent worker training, but also collaboration across the field, right? I think a lot of employers are doing this, but if you think about it from a capacity perspective too, employers can only have so many touch points with so many ecosystem players. So that's why that regional collaboration is really, really important, and having, systems and processes to be able to do that, to kind of talk to many at once instead of kind of a one-to-one model, which has actually been what has been done in the past. I think employers also see the value of upskilling their own employees, but the kind of the locus of control of who is responsible for that is still kind of up in the air oftentimes. So we see a lot of investment right now into AI literacy, for example. We're seeing a lot of efforts in the AI space, at least knowing that this is going to be widely and broadly applicable across many occupations and industries. And I think employers are starting to recognize that and therefore put in the capacity as well as the dollars towards some of that training. I think we need to also think broadly about what is needed in this era for workers and learners to succeed. We know AI literacy is fundamental, but we also know it's the durable skills that are really going to come to the forefront for as we use AI and collaborate with AI more and more, those are really coming into demand. We're seeing that data in job postings, and we know that employers are really valuing experience. So going back to the questions about, what is happening to entry-level roles, the reason why we're seeing some of this trend is because AI lends itself to automating a lot of the tasks within entry-level roles. And so therefore, the level of domain expertise, of experience, comes more to the forefront. And so how can we help folks to develop that earlier on? As Dr. Dempsey was saying, like we talk about it at JFF as the big blur. We need to blur the lines between education and work so that job seekers, learners, workers have more time to get those reps under their belt, right? To really understand what is it like to use these skills and tools in practice, as Ali was also alluding to in the cyberspace, so that they can be more ready to demonstrate that expertise and knowledge that employers really want on day one. And then what is the role for employers too, to help some of their junior level talent continue to upskill into the roles and facilitate internal mobility? That's definitely a question that folks are asking right now, and thinking about what are skills-based ways that they can also facilitate some of those changes.
And do you see like a significant difference between small and medium-sized enterprises and large enterprises? Because I could imagine that, the difference in resources could play
Definitely
a
a
role
resource and capacity issue difference, right? Larger employers simply just have more of that capacity, more of the time to be able to think about what does workforce strategy and planning look like. On the small business side, we're definitely seeing, folks are very strapped. You think about some HR departments might be one person, and that person, if they're also then responsible on, in addition to their day job, also having to think about what does AI adoption look like, that's not necessarily feasible for one person. So having more support and resources for that, and having the collaboration between regional partners and the learn to work ecosystem in their regional areas is really going to support small businesses on that front, because they're not necessarily going to be able to take advantage of that on their own.
Thanks. So, Ali, from your work, do you have any insight into which regions do better, or what makes a region specifically successful for the cyber talent pipeline? Oh, I think we just lost Ali. Oh, there she is.
It's the snow. I'm so sorry. I think I don't know about where everyone is watching from, but we got hit with a lot of snow where I'm at, and I think that it's just disrupted my internet. So, Matthias, I think you were in the process of asking me a question. I'm so sorry that I just bugged out, but I think I'm okay. I did turn off my security cameras. I think that was draining the internet connection.
We got a warning about inclement weather. So no. So my question was, going back to the regional differences. So from your work, do you have insights into what makes a region successful in creating a cyber talent pipeline? What other regions might be able to learn from?
Yeah. So, and for the sake of time, and also so that I don't just completely reiterate what Dr. Dempsey said, I want to plus one everything she mentioned earlier about what makes an ecosystem work really well. But just a couple of points. So, like, yes, absolutely. I've seen strategies that make a difference in certain regions. And so in an ideal ecosystem, and I'm speaking specifically to cyber here, but this is of course not limited only to cyber, but in this ideal ecosystem, the demand for cyber talent would be set by employers. So what kind of cyber talent is generally needed or required in an area? What skills or tools do they need experience working with, as I mentioned before? And then those questions are then translated into curriculum and programming that can actually prepare students to be workforce ready. And so, yes, in practice and theory, this model can be really effective, but it requires participation from all parties. And so through my work and my discussions with practitioners, educators, I found that the common barrier to entry here, or even the common barrier entry to scale, is often getting this employer buy-in. So getting employers to actually participate in these systems that they are a part of and will ultimately benefit from. And so I'll leave everyone just kind of quickly with So what is a great example of how this works in practice? And I'd love to take a look at the National Initiative for Cybersecurity Education, NICE for short, their RAMPS program. This is also known as the Regional Alliances and Multi-Stakeholder Partnerships to Stimulate RAMPS, Cybersecurity Education Workforce Development. And so this RAMPS program builds like coalitions of these multi-stakeholder workforce partnerships of employers, schools, higher ed, other sort of community organizations to like specifically meet these shortages in occupations and cyber occupations and to focus on developing the workforce to meet industry needs in the local or regional economy. And so there was just a recent round of funding for RAMPS. They announced $3 million to support continued RAMPS development. And I believe that each awardee is required to submit to NICE a report on the effect of their program at the end of their award period, or at least the first cohort of RAMPS awardees was required to do that. And so if you sift through those initial RAMPS program report outcomes, which I have, you'll find that regions who were really successful in cultivating these cyber talent ecosystems, they have one factor in common, and it is reciprocal and responsive partnerships between the education providers and the employers. And so that is absolutely critical to the success of workforce development ecosystems, and I think will continue to remain critical to future success of ecosystems as well.
Awesome.
And sorry for bugging out.
No, it happens. We only have a few minutes left, so I think I'll take two questions from the audience, if that's okay with the panelists. One I see here is maybe it's a good question for all panelists here. What are your thoughts on the need for specific expertise in AI forensics, which basically means the talent to analyze why an AI system did not function as intended, not due to cybersecurity, to include being causal in a fatal accident? Any thoughts on talent skills for AI forensics?
I'll take a stab at this one. I think this is the first time I've heard this term, but I think the idea is has been talked about often as we think about that shift of what entry-level jobs might look like in the age of AI. You might see turning from just kind of doing the task yourself to managing, agents yourself. And I think the same principle applies here, which is in order to know how to do that, you need to be able to discern and understand how these systems work, how they're operating, where they went wrong, and how to fix it. And so I definitely think that is going to be a skill that is going to be needed. And, just another plug for why AI literacy and fluency and understanding and use of specific industry tools is going to be more and more important, in addition to the domain expertise to be discerning about what the outputs of these models are.
I can add a little bit to that. Tiffany that's amazing what you just said. So I don't know if I can offer a whole lot more, but just in this last week, I was working with a accounting firm, and no one in the accounting firm had worked in forensic accounting. And we were talking about what the benefits to thinking about forensics in that discipline, what that would mean. And someone said right off the bat, wow, that means we can make a lot of money. And I said, let's think about what is the purpose of it, right? So I echo what Tiffany just said. I think when we think about these skill sets, they're needed now. So the idea that, we think about true expertise in an area like AI forensics, we're looking at people who understand technical skills and think about modeling behavior and data tracing, and also being able to look at anomaly detection and thinking about reasoning and legal awareness. And I think some of that requires some human critical thinking, which right now in higher ed is huge, right? Like teaching people how to be critical, not just rely on AI outputs. The other thing I think related to an area like AI forensics, I think we have to think about explainability and what it means as far as what Tiffany said, how are these systems made? Where's the transparency? thinking about those decisions, what, the decisions that are made, the data that shapes them. And I think we have a long way to go because a lot of that isn't transparent. So I just wanted to add that piece in, but I thought what Tiffany said was perfect.
Thank you so much. I know we're on time, but if you guys can stay a couple more minutes longer, because I have one more question that's probably because it's it relates to Pathwise, and I think since we started with Pathwise, and this probably is a good question for Sonali, is everybody okay staying a couple more minutes, and then we can have that question, and then we wrap it up? Good. So there's one question, and I think Sonali, you're probably best suited to answer that one. So how can we use tools like Pathwise to support and connect students with employers and governments to fill critical emerging technology fields needs?
That's a great question, actually. So one way that I can immediately think of it being useful for students is being able to see certain ecosystems where these job postings are actually high in demand for a given time period. Our hope with Pathwise is that we'll be updating these features intermittently, and we are also working to reduce the time lag between the education and workforce metrics itself, so that they are all continuous and it's easier for students to see where these job postings are high in demand in real time itself. So I think that would be very useful for students. But one thing I would highlight is that all of this depends on how our data is updated and when these data sets are also updated by iPads itself. So we are working to reduce the time lag, but at the very least, this will give us some information about some regional hubs that we wouldn't have thought of otherwise itself.
Okay. Great. Thanks so much. So we are at 1 minute overtime. I apologize for that. But thank you all so much for sharing your expertise, sharing your time. I learned a lot. I think it was a wonderful discussion, and yeah, really great webinar, I think. Thanks so much everyone for contributing.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.